Ah, you hear it too, then. The crawling hush behind the bells, the wheezing of old lungs sealed in bird-bone masks. Praise be, child, you've come far enough to listen. The monk's voice slithers like incense through unseen cracks, gravel-thin and drenched in rot-sweet reverence. The dead are no longer counted. You're the only one left. The physician does not return, but his bag is cursed. Humming bag is found hidden behind the altar, beneath a floorboard that should not open. They often died faster than priests. You do not remember lifting it, but suddenly it is there, resting in your lap like a sleeping cat with bones too many. Its contents remain locked under Vatican custody, classified as non vitas et voces, not of life, but of voice. And sealing it in beeswax would let them speak directly to archangels through breath alone. You open it, not because you wish to. Act. Not because you dare. You open it because the parchment inside opens you. The first page is not made of paper. It is made of wax, thin and translucent, inscribed with something between ink and rust. The writing curves unnaturally, coiling like veins around the margin. You hold it to the candlelight, and the words shift. One phrase clings to your memory like mold to bread. Blessed be the breathless, for they shall inherit silence. You recognize the hand, for it is your own, though you have never written these lines. Beneath this page more follow, some stained with bile, others with holy oil. A faint map of plague-ridden cities sketches itself in watermarks. Every town visited by the doctor is marked not with a cross, but with an open mouth. The bag itself begins to pulse, faintly. You place your hand on it, and it breathes. Your hands are clean, or so you think, but we all carry the dust. Sit now. Sit close. For within these writings lie truths the church discarded and the scholars buried. You read on, heart fluttering like a page in stormwind. One entry describes the use of beeswax to seal not wounds but confessions. Another mentions a monastery that kept its relics in the skulls of infants. And then comes the passage that names the monk who welcomed the plague with open arms and sang hymns to it as it entered the lungs. You read the name? It is yours, yet the ink has dried for decades. You are shaking now, but you cannot stop. You turn the page, and the candle bends toward it, as if hungry. Tonight we turn open a satchel never meant to be unbuckled. A physician's bag, sealed with tarred leather, lined with cursed velvet, kissed by the breath of dying kings. A bag heavy not with medicine, but with memory. He pauses. The candle before him quivers. If you wish to shield your spirit, you may anoint your ears with sacred oil, or simply mark your presence in the comments below. Alongside the hour you found this plague? Yes. Let others know when the monk visited your dwelling. It keeps the ward strong. If you're trembling, thumb presses the seal of subscription. A fresher parchment may one day find you. His lips peel back in dry amusement. You ask what lies within this physician's relic? It is not a remedy, not quite. It is. Writings found in a plague doctor's bag, his fingers flutter. Now, let us turn the first page. The first time you see him, he is a silhouette framed by a monastery's burning window. He does not speak. His mask, shaped like a beak, painted with ash and wax, leans forward as if listening to the moans of the flame. In his hand, a bag swings low, its seams stitched with what you will later learn are sinews soaked in salt and vinegar. He passes you without glance, and yet the scent he leaves behind anchors itself in your lungs like scripture. A mix of must, rosewater, sulfur, and myrrh, left too long in a locked reliquary. You are a novice then, charged only with tending the dead. He is the physician, summoned not to heal, but to witness. He examines each body by candlelight and records no diagnosis. Instead, he hums. You remember this because the tune makes no sense to your ear. It climbs where it should fall and breaks when it should bend. On the 5th day of his visit, you peek into the room where he stays, forbidden though it is. You see him kneeling over his satchel, the mask set beside him like a skull without eyes. Beneath the thin cowl, he is no older than you, and yet his hands. Ah, those hands move as if their joints recall Rome's collapse and Babel's rise. He does not notice you, or perhaps he does and chooses silence. In his satchel, you see many things. A rosary looped with iron beads, a vial that glows faintly blue, a folded note sealed with yellow wax. The scent from within the bag creeps toward you like a question you forgot to ask. Years pass. The monastery falls silent after the second wave, its bells stolen or melted down by passing armies. You tell yourself this is madness. But no, it is scripture. It's forbidden, perhaps, but no less divine. Obscure historical fact. Some plague doctors in 14th century Italy were not physicians, but hired scribes, chosen for their ability to write quickly as patients dictated last confessions. Fringe ritual. A pre-Black Death sect in Provence believed that anointing the plague doctor's mask with thurible ash unsolved mystery. In 1379, sealed physician's bag was found under the altar of a ruined chapel in Ferrara. The second layer of the bag exhales as if alive. Not dust, but something finer, clinging to your nostrils like powdered bone. You unwrap a bundle of dark cloth, and from its folds rolls a small glass vial, blackened with soot, yet warm to the touch. The candle's light withdraws, repelled by whatever coats your face. You realize the bomb has numbed them, or perhaps taught them not to close. The monk's voice returns as if drawn from the ink itself. We wore it when we walked into the fever halls. Only one monk survived, blind from birth. Not to guard the flesh, no. To blur the line between patient and priest, between truth and dream. The parchment curls. Ink drips upward. It has no scent, until touched. You look again at the bag. It no longer lies still. Seams twitch gently. Something beneath the remaining layers wants to be seen. You close the vial, seal it tight, but the scent lingers still, not on the air, but in your memory, staining every recollection like wine on linen. You can no longer see the bag clearly. It is wrapped in shadows, thicker than cloth, pulsing like a second heart. But something in you changes. The monks of Foggia wore blindfolds woven from hair, chanting without sight for 7 days. Believing the disease traveled not through air, but through gaze. They said that to see the plague was to love it, that its beauty broke the faithful. The physician, you now recall, walked among them without mask. He anointed each brow with oil from this very vial. Days later, every monk was found in prayer. Eyes open, smiles serene, lungs liquefied. Their bodies were untouched by rats or decay. Their mouths had been sewn shut with silk, though no thread was found. You can see the afterimage of what once touched the objects. Fingers too long, hands that tremble with joy, not fear. The bomb's hum fades from your ears, replaced by a pressure behind your eyes. You sense a presence, not in the room, inside you. It was banned after one apothecary reportedly saw angels weeping backward, as if the bomb has made space for something else to dwell. You reach for the next layer of the bag, now no longer hesitant. You understand? This is not curiosity. This is pilgrimage. Each item a relic, each breath a verse. In each moment, a descent. The bomb shows you not what is present, but what clings. The vial rolls once more. Beneath it is a folded square of vellum etched in near-invisible ink. You tilt it toward the candle, and words crawl into vision. A recipe for the bomb. No physician's formula this. It calls for ash from a saint's wedding veil, blood from a tongue that has spoken heresy, and tears drawn by force from one who cannot cry. Mixed beneath the moon and sealed in a bottle filled not with oil, but with silence, collected in the first hour of Mass. At the bottom of the page, to see what eyes must never remember. The label is barely legible, its Latin scratched with a trembling hand. Oleum Valae Nigra. The balsam of the black veil. The liquid within is neither fully fluid nor still. A syrup that shimmers without light, moving even when the bottle rests unmoved. You hold it to your ear. It hums softly, like breath from a buried mouth. Your fingers tremble as you unstitch the cork. The scent is immediate and impossible. Damp violets, dying firewood, the sting of burnt incense at the back of a funeral nave. Beneath it, something sweeter. The kind of sweetness that follows rot like fruit left too long beneath a child's bed. As the fumes rise, your vision smears. You see the monk again, the one from your youth, kneeling before the physician's bag, the same vial in his palm. He tilts his head back and smears a droplet beneath each eye. He whispers words not meant for air, Remember them as if from a dream. Anoint the sight, veil the soul, not what watches see. You do not remember placing the balm upon your skin, but now it is there. A thin film beneath your eyes, cold and hot at once. Your breath slows. You try to blink, but your eyelids resist. You remember the feast of St. Mercurialis held during the height of plague. The candle sputters. You shiver. Obscure historical fact. In 1357, a Florentine monastery reported monks engaging in blind rituals during plague outbreaks, claiming that unseeing devotion shielded them from infection. Fringe ritual. The oil of the black veil was whispered of in Germanic alchemical texts. It's believed to grant second sight while erasing the first. Unsolved mystery. A preserved vial sealed with saintly wax resides in the ossuary beneath Salzburg Cathedral, catalogued only as Oleum Tenebrarum. The bag resists your fingers now, not with weight but with reluctance, as if some unseen force within has become aware of your intrusion. You press onward. Beneath the folds of velvet stitched with mildew and sorrow, you find a flap fastened with bone toggles. They do not creak, they sigh. 2 measures of ash taken from a saint denied burial. 3 leeches marked with red ink, not for blood, but memory. A razor honed not by stone, but regret. You obey. The candle bends inward, recoiling from the heat of meaning. You read. Inventory maintained for the ceremony of the 9th visit. It resists re-entry into the flap. Like a tongue refusing to return behind teeth, you leave it atop the bag. Let it breathe. Let it remember. The inventory is awake now, its words etched behind your eyes like ash upon holy water. You try to write them down, but your fingers cramp. Its contents formed a complete list of tools. 12 named, the 13th line left blank. The bag was resealed and buried. The letters bend unnaturally, curling into glyphs of older design. Do not touch the 13th item. Do not touch the 13th item. Do not touch the 13th item. There is no 13th item listed. And yet, your hand drifts to the bag's deepest corner, where a sharpness waits. You pull back. Not out of fear, out of reverence. The items spiral downward, no longer numbered, but pulsed, as if the writer's breath had begun to fail. A fragment of an inventory found nailed to the inside of a plague cart. It described tools never used in healing, but in interrogation, of disease itself, as if plague could speak, as if it could be reasoned with, tempted, betrayed. None have been fully decoded. That list, too, ended with a warning. Never bring the mirror to the mouth. What did it mean? Did this physician speak to pestilence as one might speak to a martyr? Or was he not the speaker, but the vessel? A finger bone of the confessor who never repented. A mask shaped not for air, but for misdirection. Candle that forgets it is aflame. Your pulse slows. You sense the order matters. This is no random list. It is a ritual disguised as preparation. Liturgy sewn into leather and ink. Do not think them objects. Think them memories made solid. Their purpose is not to cut or heal, but to measure how much of you remains when the skin has forgotten your name. You nod. Your name. Yes. It feels further away now, doesn't it? A procession of tools for not healing the body, but excavating the soul. Inside is a scroll, parchment browned by centuries, rolled around a thin spindle made from polished vertebrae. The ink is uneven, sometimes thick as clotted blood, sometimes faded like a dream half recalled. This, you realize, is the physician's true inventory. Not the public list of herbs and scalpels he shared with patrons, but a hidden catalog of items never meant to be seen, let alone used. Its title, scratched in a hand unfamiliar and yet intimately your own. Instruments of benediction and undoing. You unfurl it slowly. Each line pierces like needlework through your reason. One tongue jar, sealed with honey and hymns. Beneath the list, symbols appear. Not written, but imprinted. They rise like welts on the skin of the page. Sigils unfamiliar to any school you recall. One in particular stares back, a spiral pierced by a downward pointing nail. You trace it, should not, but you do. The ink reacts, not visibly, but within your throat. You cough once, a dry sound, foreign air. You feel as if something has been taken from you. Not a breath, but a word. A word you once knew but now cannot recall. The scroll trembles. You stop reading. And yet the text continues. Bleeding through from the other side of the parchment, mere words that make no sense unless held against flame. You remember now, vaguely like fog shifting over ruined stone. A rumor among archivists of the Order of St. Lazarus. You roll the scroll back tightly, but it no longer fits as it once did. You hear the monk again. Every tool in the bag has been kissed by silence. Obscure historical fact. Several Plagira physicians carried secret inventories and ciphers derived from monastic shorthand. Some believed to include exorcism relics hidden as medical supplies. Fringe ritual, the ceremony of the ninth visit, found referenced in one 14th century Occident text, supposedly invoked the soul of pestilence itself by arranging forbidden items in a spiral upon a cathedral floor. It's an unsolved mystery in 1722. A locked satchel was discovered during renovation of a Franciscan crypt in Avignon. The next parchment is thin, fragile, and tucked between two sheets of velvet that feel unnaturally cold, as if they've been soaked in something long removed. The edges are scorched, curled inward like petals of a burned rose. Upon it, drawn in the same hand as the cursed inventory, is the image of a man nailed not to a cross, but to a wheel of unmarked time. Blood flows not down, but up, back into wounds, into veins, into his eyes, which gaze skyward in mute ecstasy. Beneath the image is a caption, faint and shivering, Sanctus in versus. If the soul forgets its own sin, is it redeemed or lost? The text offers no answer, only more questions. Sanctus in versus was canonized in silence. His miracles leave no trace. His feast day is yesterday, you blink. That line was not there before. You check again. The ink is still wet. He who reversed the passion. A saint unknown to any canon. No hagiography speaks his name. No relic lies in any reliquary. Of a chapel where statues weep not from the eyes but from the navel. Where frescoes of saints appear only when viewed in reflection, and always moving slowly backward, step by step, toward the altar. He said the priests there speak in mirrored Latin, and their chants, when recorded, produce the screams of newborns played in reverse. You laughed then, you do not laugh now. And yet here, the physician has written of him as one might write of breath, necessary but feared. To bleed backward is to remember the first wound, the one we do not speak of, the one the first breath tried to seal. Every healing is a forgetting. But this was a remembering so sharp it turned time inside out. You press the linen veil between your palms. It warms briefly. A pulse, not yours. The passage accompanying the image reads like a hymn inverted. No formal investigation followed. It tells of a man who bled only in moments of truth and whose wounds sealed themselves in lies. When opened in 1621, it contained only air, heavy, warm, and briefly pulsing. He was crucified not to suffer, but to recall. Each nail drove not pain into his flesh, but memory. At the hour of death, he did not cry out. He inhaled his final breath and held it, still holding it, if the text is to be believed. The physician writes of finding a church in ruins near the Rhine, where bloodstains flowed upward into the ceiling. There he recovered this parchment, sealed behind a mirror that reflected only your back, even when you faced it. His notes suggest the saint was not a man at all, but an idea incarnated during the third pandemic, a psychic rejection of plague so intense that it took form. Below the illustration, a second hand has added text, the letters stilted and afraid. The bones of inverses are said to be scattered in wind. The physician claims this to be the veil of reversal, worn during a ritual known only as the unconfession. In this rite, participants kneel not to admit guilt, but to speak aloud their greatest truths. Backwards, not in language, but in intent. The act it is written forces time to glance over its shoulder. And in that moment, that sacred lapse, disease may falter. Pestilence, the physician writes, has memory. If it hears the truth unspoken, it forgets whom it was to claim. Seek not their marrow, lest your heart beat out of order. Chill coils at the base of your spine. You feel your own pulse reverse for half a beat, stumble, recover. Was that fear, or did the parchment itself respond? There is more. Folded in the margin, hidden by adhesive wax, a sliver of cloth, black linen, pierced thrice by rusted pinholes. The theological implications burn your mind. Sin can be unraveled by reversal, then perhaps grace too can be undone. Does salvation require memory? You remember now? A tale whispered once by a penitent traveler at the gates of your monastery? The monk's voice returns, crawling through your ribs. Obscure historical fact. A 14th century church ruin near ARLs was documented to have inverted blood spatter patterns on its ceiling, leading 18th century scholars to dub it the Chapel of Ascending Wounds. Fringe ritual. The Unconfession, recorded in fragments within the Codex Umbri, was believed to reverse spiritual contamination by declaring truth in nonlinear thought, often resulting in catatonia. Unsolved mystery. A reliquarian lion once bore the inscription, Assa Inversi. The next object rests in a shallow wooden tray, lined with faded velvet the color of old blood. It is paper, yes, but not ordinary. A parchment made of fused layers, some stiff as bark, others fine as skin. He speaks of a rite performed beneath the ossuaries of Antibes, a choir assembled not from living monks, but from cadavers whose vocal cords were carefully removed, dried, and stretched across copper frames. He describes the effect of the rite. Performed correctly, he says, the breathless choir does not banish disease, it names it, and in naming it binds. Place your tongue to the roof of your mouth. Think not of air, but of absence. The handwriting changes, smaller, narrower, scratched, as if in fever. The choir shall not be summoned without the anchor. The anchor is not a person, it is not a place. The anchor is the memory of breath. Keep it close. You stare at the phrase for minutes, hours longer. You begin to forget your own voice. Try to recall how it sounds. It's difficult. You think perhaps it was deeper or higher. They emit faint tones when no one is present. Or someone else's. And then somehow you exhale without exhaling. A tremor runs down your arms. The parchment grows warm. And there are rituals so holy that they strip the lungs of air to keep the soul unanchored, softer or wetter. You do not inspect further. Instead, you begin to count, not with voice, with silence. Each number a beat, each beat a name. The room listens. So does something deeper. It describes singing to disease without giving it sound and warns. The third refrain never forgets. You read their notes, but it is your breath they require. The parchment fades slightly in your grip, but the resonance remains. Your chest no longer rises when you inhale. You realize you're still breathing, but the lungs have stopped listening. You see faces, some ancient, some newborn mouths open, not in scream, not in song, but in revelation. Not a word is spoken, and yet you understand. The practice was banned by 3 consecutive popes, yet was never formally disproven. He tells of a child in Aix-en-Provence who survived the plague, after being sung over in silence by his dying mother. She had sewn her lips shut and lay beside him, moving only her jaw. The child heard nothing, and yet, when he awoke, the disease had fled. Every candle in the house had extinguished itself. Her body was never found. Only the jawbone remained, still gently clicking. These were played not like instruments, but like conduits. Air was not blown through them. Rather, silence was pressed into them. A ritual inversion of chant, where breath was the absence of sound, and meaning arrived only when nothing remained to be heard. The breathless choir, he writes, requires no ears, only memory. Etched across it are rows of meticulous symbols, their spacing reminiscent of musical notation, but none conform to any known scale. Where clefts should rise, there are spiral sigils. Where rests belong, there are open mouths drawn in profile. Along the margin, a single phrase, stitched not in ink, but with human hair. Canticum inhalatum, for those who sing without breath. Beneath this, the physician's hand resumes its litany. This rite is not sung with lungs. It is carved into the bone of silence, and echoes in places lungs no longer reach. You do not understand, not fully, but already your throat tightens, anticipating something unnatural. The physician's notes continue beneath the score. You feel the vibration now, low and steady, not in the air, but beneath your sternum. A droning hum, as if the room has begun to remember a tune it once forgot. You clutch the parchment tighter. As you do, ink begins to bleed outward, the notes realigning themselves. The sigils blink, not metaphorically. They blink, opening and closing like mouths sealed by centuries. You try to hum, and the sound catches in your throat. It's not blocked, forgotten. Your mouth moves, but no air stirs. And yet, harmony grows. The physician's writing becomes frantic near the end of the page. You dare to follow the rite's first instruction. You close your eyes. Somewhere in the parchment, hidden between notes and ink, another passage reveals itself. The monk's voice returns, distant now, strained, as if chanted from within your bones. There are songs that only silence may remember. You tuck the parchment back into the tray. Its texture has changed. Obscure historical fact. In 1348, the Black Friars of Toulouse were accused of performing silent masses for the dead, using severed vocal cords suspended in golden frames. Fringe ritual. The rite of the breathless choir appears once in the grimoire of St. Vultus. A lost text recovered in fragments in Ghent. Unsolved mystery. A series of copper lyres, each strung with organic material resembling dried tendon, were discovered beneath the ruins of Cinque Mori de Ossuaires in 1802. You are no longer certain how many pages you have turned, how many breaths you've surrendered. Time feels inverted, folding into itself like parchment scorched at the edges. The next object does not lie flat like the others. It clinks as you move the velvet aside, metallic and reverent. A small bronze bell, no larger than a clenched fist, rests atop a strip of funeral linen. A solitary monk would toll the bell 12 times, but never upward. The linen beneath it is damp. You press a finger to the moisture. It is not water. It is memory. The texture of sorrow made liquid. Tucked beneath the bell's linen is a torn leaf from a book. Handwritten, smudged by fingers that trembled. The page records names. Dozens. Each accompanied by a number, always descending. Some end with I. But what happens when the bell marks not death's coming, but its agreement to leave? His breath turns brittle. Each chime bought time, but time borrowed is time owed. Survivors claimed a monk rang a descending bell for 12 nights. The monk was found dead, smiling without a tongue. Attempts to record its sound have all failed. Microphones go mute. Others, with zero. Next to those, no names follow. You feel lighter, not in spirit, in substance. Something of you, a name, a memory, a taste, remains inside the bell. You do not know which, you do not ask. The counting continues, unheard, unhalting. It outlines a rite to delay death using bells that hum, not ring, concluding. When silence returns, the gate is sealed. Only ink stains, as if the physician's pen faltered or wept. A mourning for something not yet lost. Without doubt, this bell was used not to mark death, but to postpone it in the ribs, in the molars. A hum, low and wet, brushing the bottom of your thoughts. You have not rung the bell, and yet it begins to count. It's not allowed. In you, its chimes are not warnings. They are invitations. When rung in descent, they count how long you may remain untouched, only downward. With each chime, he would recite a verse from a forgotten psalter written in reverse Latin. At the final toll, the bell would not stop. It would hum low and constant until silence returned on its own. The physician describes how, once, the bell continued humming for 12 days. During that time, no birds entered the village. No one spoke. No one died. When the humming stopped, 12 corpses were found in their beds, mouths open, eyes pressed shut with coins that had not been minted yet. You expect it to chime when lifted, but it does not. Instead, the metal vibrates against your skin with a soft thrum, like the echo of a memory trying to escape the bone. Etched into the bell's surface are 12 numbers, not arranged in sequence, but in descent. 12, she, X. All the way down to I. The bell, the physician writes, is not meant to toll life. Instead, a coil of hair, knotted tightly, weaved through with bits of tooth and dried rose petals, dangles inside, brushing the bronze. The sound it makes is not sound. It is absence, a feeling of something removed. Your stomach clenches. you recognize the sensation. Not unlike the moment when prayer dies mid-syllable and the tongue forgets what it asked for. The linen beneath the bell is marked with a name. Velia de Vignon. A child, a nun, a patient. The physician does not say. Only that the bell was taken from her hand when she died for the second time. It is designed to count the moments remaining once death has agreed to wait. His script grows smaller here, precise and desperate, like a man trying to trap breath on paper. When rung, it begins. Not a countdown to death, but a countdown from it. A reversal not of time, but of silence. You turn the bell gently. There is no clapper within. The accompanying entry begins like a confession. He speaks of a ritual performed in the bell tower of a leper church outside Narbonne. You glance down at the bell. It now rests on its side, though you do not recall tipping it. There is more, and then you hear it. It's not with ears. The monk's whisper crawls up your spine. We ring bells toward death, yes. You place the bell back into the velvet, careful not to disturb the numbers. Obscure historical fact. In 1381, during the plague, of a single monastery reportedly remained untouched. Fringe ritual. The descent toll appears in a single French fragment from Les Cantiques Interdits. Unsolved mystery. A bell recovered from a Carthusian ruin near Montpellier is inscribed with backward numerals and emits a humming vibration when held. The next object waits hidden beneath layers of scripture. A psalter bound in worn lambskin, stained with wax, marked with symbols that predate the alphabet. The cover bears no title, only a circle within a circle, each enclosing a pair of lungs drawn in exacting detail, flayed open like wings. The words are Latin but broken, as if translated too many times across tongues that no longer live. Psalm 23, the shepherd's comfort, is mirrored by a passage that opens. He leads me beside waters that rot. Within it lies a thin sliver of bone. The hyoid you recognize, delicate, horseshoe-shaped. Tied to it is a strand of red thread and a note in tight script. This belonged to Brother Callistus, who tried to sing both songs. A smudge left on parchment when the soul leans too close. But he never coughed again. You set the bone down, your throat dry. You want to sing? You don't. He restores what should have stayed broken. Of a monastery in the high Alps where every monk prayed beneath their breath, heads bowed, not in reverence, but shame. They said the psalms had been replaced with shadows, that each verse was written twice, once by the hand, once by the fever. The monks had vanished. Only their breath-stained robes remained. When the abbot died, his tongue was found folded beneath his heart, inscribed with the Magnificat in mirrored text. Only monks trained in double-voiced discipline were permitted to attempt it. Psalm 51's plea for cleansing is answered by "Wash me not, for sin remembers the water." The Psalter is not a contradiction of Scripture. It is its echo. Not holy, not heretical, but something in between. You begin to understand. This book was meant not for mass, but for a different kind of worship. One that meets pestilence as a guest, not an enemy. One that prays not to be spared, but to be noticed. The first decipherable phrase pierces like a thorn through silk, where prayer is spoken with expectation. The disease waits, but when prayer is offered without breath, the disease cannot hear. You pause, breath catching, then read further. The hidden text describes a condition of the soul, a theological fever, that afflicts only those who pray with hope. This spiritual contagion, as the physician names it, spreads not through the body, but through conviction. The more one believes in mercy, he writes, the more fertile the host. He speaks of cities where churches collapsed inward, not from fire or famine, but from the weight of their own petitions. Choirs that sang until their mouths cracked open. Monks who confessed too deeply and vanished into thin air. The book resists your hand at first, its pages clinging together with the stubbornness of old skin. You pry it open, not forcefully, but with a reverence you no longer question. The Psalms greet you, familiar and soothing at first glance. though the ink has faded to rust. You turn the first few pages and then, abruptly, your fingers stop. You feel it, a shift in texture, a faint roughness beneath the words. You hold the page to the candlelight, tilting it just so. And there it is, a second script hidden beneath the visible text, scrawled in ochre ink so faint it flickers in and out of sight. The monk's voice, brittle now, slips between the lines. What you read is not song, it is residue. Obscure historical fact. In 1372, Benedictine psalter recovered from a plague-stricken abbey in Freiburg was found to contain microscopic layers of hidden script beneath traditional verses. You lift a wafer, brittle and pale, encased in glass that hums faintly when brought near your chest. It is stamped with a sigil not sanctioned by any synod, a circle cleaved by two arrows, one pointing heavenward, the other back into earth. Begin by declaring what never happened, the notes instruct. Lie as you place the chalice, which falsehood must be uttered with certainty. You do not open the glass. You dare not. Diagrams appear. Crude sketches of altar cloths arranged in the shape of lungs, a chalice that bleeds upward, a mask placed upon a crucifix. The words repeat. The lie must be believed, even by the body. You begin to understand the logic. If the plague follows truth, if it clings to certainty, then deceit becomes a cloak. A veil not of holiness, but of survival. You remember the phrase from earlier? Blessed be the breathless, for they shall inherit silence. The rite requires one lie to be told sincerely and never recanted. Now, you see it clearly. To breathe is to be known. To lie is to remain unseen. Attempts to carbon date it have failed. The glass surrounding it darkens whenever light touches it. But your lips begin to mouth the words silently, as if compelled. This is my lie, which I have prepared for you. Locals claimed no prayers were ever answered there, and yet no plague touched its door. Some say the priest there was never ordained, that he faked his collar, spoke fake Latin, offered fake communion, and that his congregation thrived. When questioned, he vanished. Only the host remained, still warm. Second voice answers. Not aloud, not from the room, but from within. And there are lies so deep they cradle it. Would you offer a lie to live? Would you swallow deceit if it kept breath in your lungs? This was not sacrilege. This was mercy. You nod. You understand. You believe. A voice that sounds like yours, spoken by someone else, he was never found. Only a circle of melted candles and a parchment bearing the phrase, Hoc est mendicium meum. And I believe you. The host, called here the liar's host, is placed not upon the tongue, but beneath it, where it dissolves into silence. It must never touch air. The wine, he notes, must be drawn from an unopened cask, one sealed in a plague house and never blessed. The rite ends with no benediction, only breath. If done correctly, the priest forgets the lie, but the body remembers. And what the body remembers, the plague cannot claim. Around its edge, words so delicately etched, they seem like cracks. Hoc est mendicium meum. This is my lie. Beneath the wafer rests a torn folio, smudged with dark wine and wax. The physician writes in a hand thinner than before, as though he no longer trusts his own strength. The host is not broken. The host is not shared. The host is hidden. What is consumed is not the body, but the memory of truth. He refers to this rite as the Forsaken Mass, a blasphemous inversion of communion performed in solitude, where the celebrant is both priest and deceiver, vessel and virus. You read on. The Mass begins not with confession, but denial. You recoil. Yet your hands do not tremble. This ritual, this mass was performed not out of heresy, but necessity. The physician includes the account of a man named Brother Arvinius, who conducted the rite during a pestilence in Chartres. He told no one. He swallowed the lie. And for 3 months his body glowed faintly in candlelight. Rats avoided him. Mold grew backward across his cell wall. But when he died, his tongue was found nailed to the underside of his desk, pierced by the stylus he used for prayer. Beneath it, written in Latin, the truth returns. You glance again at the wafer. It does not flake or bend, but seems to absorb light, drinking in the glow of the candle without reflection. The text becomes increasingly fragmented. Sentences trail off. You recall a ruined chapel near Enchiems, its altar scorched, and its font filled with salt. The monk's voice rasps through the back of your skull, brittle with withheld dread. There are truths so brittle they shatter the soul. Obscure historical fact. In 1352, records from a suppressed Inquisition trial mention an unnamed priest in southern France who conducted masses in reverse Latin and gave communion wafers marked with sigils. Fringe ritual. The Forsaken Mass, referenced briefly in De Eucharistia Obscura, is said to create a spiritual falsehood field that wards off spiritual contagion. Unsolved mystery. A host sealed in a bell jar labeled Veritas Occultata resides in the secret archives beneath Metz Cathedral. You lift a folded sheet of vellum from the bag's next compartment, its texture waxy and stiff, like skin that remembers fire. The page opens with resistance, creasing along lines not of its own making, but as if it had been folded to fit a body. This is no ordinary affliction, he writes. This plague obeys, does not merely spread, it chooses. It walks the streets as a shepherd, not a wolf. It reads, the obedient soul is ignored by flame, the disobedient one is noticed by breath. You do not understand it fully, but your posture shifts unconsciously. Your spine straightens. You face the east-facing wall. Do not blink. He describes experiments conducted in silent towns where the infected were instructed to perform rituals of posture, facing the east at all hours. Keeping mouths closed except in prayer, refusing to blink during sunrise. Plague visited once, wandered, then departed. Only those who disobeyed even briefly perished. But you can persuade it to look away. And here, scrawled in ink so faint it seems ghosted from another world, a postscript. Obedience is not submission. It is camouflage. You feel seen, then not seen. You try not to move. Records show 0 infections during the plague's worst wave. The text concludes, to move without license is to invite breath. Around it were thousands of tiny inked glyphs on parchment, all exact replicas of the same body diagram. One woman, he notes, merely opened a shutter during the hour of stillness. Of a sickness that hovered on thresholds, never entering until one broke custom. A mother who spoke aloud during a full moon. A butcher who bled a lamb outside of ritual hour. You have not blinked in a while. You think of the diagram, not as a body, but as a map. A map of how to move or not move. A ritual of posture that might persuade death to pass you by. They died first. But those who bowed before every doorway, who chewed bitter herbs in multiples of 7, survived. Superstition, they said. But those who disobeyed died before they could mock it. Her body was found with no wounds. Only her eyes were gone. But no, it came like scripture, misunderstood. We feared its cruelty, but never considered its structure. You call it death, but it calls itself order. He inhales slowly. Would you be still, child? Would you follow rules written in no tongue? If it meant living, would you not kneel? In one account, an entire village remained untouched by pestilence for 17 days. Despite a confirmed infection in its midst, the physician attributes their survival not to divine protection, but to strict adherence to an unnatural regimen he calls the doctrine of alignment. Ink skitters across its surface like black frost, diagramming a human form in stages of collapse. Lungs inverted. RIBs drawn like cages turned inward, veins spiraling in unnatural geometries. The left arm, extend during thunder, retract at bell's toll. The right leg do not move during dusk. The physician believed that disease could be negotiated with, that plague given a pattern would respect it, not out of compassion, but recognition. The margin reads, "It is not chaos. It is scripture waiting to be read properly." He compares the plague to a hound that follows commands only when spoken in a forgotten tongue. At first glance, it appears to be a medical study. But the longer you look, the more the figure resembles not a person but a city. Streets branching like bronchi. Cathedrals nestled where the heart should be. Alleys curling like intestines. And at its center, an empty space, marked with a single word, obsequium, obedience. The physician's marginalia coils around the anatomy in ever-tightening spirals. You examine the chart further. Each limb of the drawn figure is annotated with tiny glyphs, notations of behavior and posture. Taped to the back of the vellum is a narrow slip of paper. A prayer, a warning. The physician references a city, unnamed, now vanished, where survivors painted eyes on every window and were instructed never to turn their backs on them. Beneath the drawing, a final note. You cannot cure what watches. Remember the rumor of the plague that waits? A whispered fear in merchant quarters of Marseille? The monk's voice is tighter now, like parchment tearing near the spine. We thought the plague came like fire, random and ravenous. You fold the vellum. It groans faintly in protest. Your body aches. Your limbs tremble from stillness, more than strain. Remain facing east. Obscure historical fact. In 1366, the plague protocol of Eberbach Monastery instructed all monks to sit facing the altar for 13 hours a day and to never turn their heads. Fringe ritual, the doctrine of alignment. Documented anonymously in a black leather folio found beneath Strasbourg's cathedral floor, prescribes exact bodily positions said to repel spiritual contagion. Unsolved mystery. In 1753, skeleton discovered in the walls of a shuttered Carthusian chapel was seated upright, facing east, hands folded. You find a mirror wrapped in lamb's wool, sealed with a stitch of red thread, passed through what appears to be dried iris petals. The wool is damp, not with water, with intention. You unwrap the mirror slowly. But where your eyes should be, there is only flickering shadow, shifting as if behind veils. The moment your breath touches the glass, the mirror trembles. And then, just beyond the surface, blemishes begin to bloom. Not on your skin, on your reflection. Do not speak near the mirror if the room contains echoes. One patient, he recalls, brought the mirror to a well. After speaking his truths aloud, the man was found the next morning with mirror flesh, as if his skin had turned to reflective silver, every breath fogging itself. His eyes had no pupils, only glass. The well water, when drawn, reflected the faces of strangers. They start as bruises beneath the cheekbones, then spread, spider-like, across your brow, down the jaw, gathering at the throat like a noose made of rot. The last entry. Marcellus led to the dying. Refused to repent. A mirror cracked. The glass you hold is whole. Now, requiring the penitent to speak into a reflective surface before death. The ritual was outlawed for causing uncontrollable sobbing. One by one, sores rise. Not bleeding, not broken, but undeniably real. Mystery. A mirror once sealed in a reliquary box in the Black Priory of Toulouse was found fogged from within, though never opened. When displayed publicly in 1871, it cracked down the middle after a visitor whispered near it. And each patient who entered was required to speak one unspoken truth before the door closed behind them. The ones who lied? Their reflections remained, standing motionless behind the mirror long after the body had been carried away. Some say the hospice burned not from plague, but from reflection overload, as if the weight of so many unconfessed sins turned to fire. You now understand why some monks died with mirrors stitched into their robes, not for vanity, but for confession without ears. You wonder how many carried sins to their graves, because no one dared show them the glass. You reach to touch your face. It is smooth, unchanged. But the reflection is condemned. Speak your sin into wood, into stone, into candlelight, and it may dissolve. But swallow it, and it will rise again, this time wearing your skin. He wheezes. The mirror does not accuse. It reveals. It is round, no larger than the width of your palm, its frame of dull brass, etched with indecipherable sigils. Not decorative, but diagnostic. You whisper, "I watched him die and did nothing." Another fades. but 2 more appear. You stop. You cover the mirror. It does not go dark. It waits. His tombstone bears no name, only the Latin for I saw. Around its edge, a sentence is etched again and again in descending spiral. Loquere, eti apparabit. I speak, and it shall appear. A new mark appears across your lips, black like soot, in the shape of a sealed letter. You understand now, when silence can be a sin. The glass does not reflect your face, not truly. Your outline is there, vague, translucent. The physician, S notes, curled and pressed between 2 wafers of waxed parchment. Explain the object S function. He names it speculum culpae, the mirror of sin. It is not meant to show what you are. It shows what you have not confessed. It's the sins unspoken, the secrets buried beneath polished prayers. It was not made for priests. It was made for those with no one left to hear them. The sick, the exiled, the already dying. When voice fails, he writes, the mirror diagnoses. He details its use in the leper colonies beyond Limoges, where monks too ill to speak would hold the glass and watch as their own failures manifested in rash, lesion, plagues well. It gave penance form, and perhaps mercy. You whisper nothing. The mirror flares. He warns of misuse. Tucked in the margins is a thin strip of cloth, stitched with names and threads so faded they feel more remembered than seen. You remember now a tale from the hospice of Saint of a room where mirrors faced inward. The monk's voice now speaks from within the breath you exhale. Truth requires no listener, but it does require shape. You look again. The blemishes have multiplied. You say nothing. One fades. You place it back in the wool, rewrap it tightly. Obscure historical fact. In 1398, the last abbot of the monastery of St. Peraldus was buried with a small bronze mirror. Said to have been used to assign penance to plague victims? Fringe ritual. The practice of mirror confession appears in a suppressed section of the Penitential Obscurum, unsolved. The next parchment is brittle, dry, and flecked with gray, as if ash from an old fire had attempted to rewrite its story. A crude sketch dominates its center, the face of a man, eyes shut, mouth ajar, but where his nose should be. There is nothing, not disfigurement, not scar. Absence, as though the flesh never considered nostrils necessary. The lines are drawn in precise, obsessive detail. The physician clearly observed him for some time. Beneath the portrait, a title scratched with bone-dry urgency. Patient Nu G Eta Tau Omicron Sigma, the unscented. You trace the annotations circling the face. People said he inhaled ghosts and exhaled absolution, that he gave no sermons, only presence, that he was what remained after too many prayers for mercy had nowhere to go, a vessel formed from unreceived confession, a reply never sent. He believed the man was not immune to plague, but irrelevant to it. The disease could not recognize him because he offered no scent, no breath, no sin. You feel your own breath grow slow, as though ashamed. You imagine what it might feel like to draw air without meaning, to exist without signature, without scent, without self. You fold the parchment and wrap the preserved face in new linen. It fits easily back into the bag, as though the leather remembers. He was called a Nosmian by the elders, and it was said that when he stood beside the dying, they remembered things they had never known. All patients reportedly recovered. The man was never named. It describes a condition where complete odorlessness is associated with spiritual neutrality and divine disinterest. Inside, inscribed in flaked gold, no breath, no burden, but this one gave nothing. He offered not defiance, but stillness. Stillness is invisible to what hungers. He wheezes once. What is unsmelled is unclaimed. The man's respiration is marked as shallow, irregular, his blood pressure stable, his appetite selective. But it is in the behavioral notes that the physician S-tone shifts, from clinical to reverent. Patient arrived during the 3rd cycle of infection in Monteolu. He spoke rarely but always at dusk. His voice was dry, not hoarse like wind through paper. Claimed to have never smelled smoke, rot, or rose. Said breath was only for remembering. More unnerving than his anatomy was his immunity. When surrounded by plague victims, he showed no sign of infection. He entered the breath of the dying without reaction. Animals did not approach him. Flies did not land. You realize with slow horror it is a flayed section of face, carefully tanned, nostrilous. A note attached reads, "Preserved by the patient himself. Requested it be returned to the bag when he was no longer seen." You do not know how long it has been in the physician's possession, but the scent of it is nothing. Not lack, absence, pure and terrifying. The physician describes how a fevered nun placed her lips upon his hand, coughing blood into his palm, and within hours, her fever broke. She survived. The man vanished the next day. His only message, a smear of soot on the infirmary wall in the shape of an open eye. The notes grow stranger. The physician writes of voices heard only when in the patient's presence. Whispers that did not reach the ear, but bloomed behind the eyes. Most disconcerting, when I asked his name, he repeated mine. After their final meeting, the physician reportedly suffered olfactory hallucinations. The scent of waxed bone, of breath thick with nothing, of silence exhaled. It drove him to bury his own mask in the river. He swore never to wear it again. Folded into the parchment is a piece of cloth, stiff and puckered, shaped like a triangle. You recall the tale of the wandering whisperer, a faceless monk who wandered plague towns reciting verses not from books, but from the mouths of the dead. The physician speculates the patient was not born, but forgotten into being. The monk's voice murmurs, thin now, like fog unspooling across a corpse. Plague seeks the warm, the known, the open mouth, and the trembling lung. You stare again at the sketch. The eyes, though closed, now seem to gaze back. Obscure historical fact, a record from the infirmary of St. Lazare, dated 1349, describes an unidentified man with no nasal passages who visited 3 plague wards in a single day. Fringe ritual, inhalatio, nihili, or the breath of absence, is a speculative rite found in fragments of the Vox Mortis manuscript. Unsolved mystery. A 15th century mask discovered in southern France bears no holes or vents. It shows we're consistent with long-term use. You reach beneath the folded cloth and draw forth something surprisingly light. A candle unlit, but still warm. Its wax is blackened but smooth, wrapped not in wick but in braided hair, tied at both ends with thorns. A faint hum emanates from it, not through air, but through bone, like a vibration that passes only through teeth and temples. Only the braid of hair at its core. Human, long, grayed, unevenly, knotted into tight cords, as if someone had woven their own regrets into it. Do not light it, it will hum. It will speak to what lies below. For 17 nights, the candle hummed. On the 18th, it cracked. The boy's body had rotted overnight, but until then, his chest had remained warm. Some candles ceased humming after a single night, others after years. Of lights buried in the earth, faint glows that pulsed beneath headstones. They called them whispers in wax. Claimed that the dead who lay with them did not rot, did not dream, but listened. That their names were never forgotten, not because they were loved, but because the soil could not bear to digest them. One recovered from beneath a nun's crypt had never stopped. It was still humming when the physician placed it in the bag. Lighting it was said to draw the soul downward permanently, but some must be coaxed. Their memory clings. The candle does not prevent the grave. It reminds the grave who it has swallowed. Audio recordings fail to capture it, but listeners report toothaches when near, and until the memory fades, it cannot feed. Surrounding skeletons bore intact cartilage and unfaded clothing. The candle's surface was unaged. A pause. Would you be remembered that long? Would you risk the hunger of silence for one more hour of form? The monk who carried it heard the hum until his final breath. When he died, the candle went silent. He did not breathe, the physician writes. But the plague could not remember he had stopped. Candle had whispered his shape back into the soil. And until the hum ceases, the heart shall not be devoured. You wonder what it would sing for you? You wrap it again, this time tighter. The hum remains. The physician believed the candle did not preserve the body. It preserved the soul's memory of form. keeping it close, delaying the second death, that deeper one. The thorn pins are sharp enough to pierce bone, and you notice something strange. No dust clings to it. The surrounding cloth is stained, but the candle is pristine. You feel its hum shift when brought near your chest. Not louder, more aware. Cannot hear it with your ears, but your skull remembers the sound. It is the resonance of dirt settling upon wood, of silence compacted by centuries. Tied to its stem is a strip of vellum, on which is scrawled in the physician's most trembling hand, "This candle must never meet flame above ground." The physician calls it lux funeris, interna, the inner burial light. He describes discovering it inside a plague mass grave. Outside, nestled among rib bones, still whole, still humming, its wax unblemished by time. He'd been called there not to document the dead, but to study those who had not decayed. The corpses closest to the candle retained color in their cheeks, closed mouths, undisturbed limbs. Elmister dug them. The deeper he dug, the louder the hum grew. "It's what is not the dead who made the sound," he writes. It was the candle mourning their refusal to rot. You inspect the wax. It bears no wick. The accompanying manuscript outlines its function in prose that reads like psalm and warning alike. Plant it with your dead. He recounts an experiment. A young boy, lifeless from fever, buried with the candle wrapped in his arms. Folded inside the vellum are field notes describing candle variants, different braids, different thorns, different lengths of hum. You remember a legend, not from books, but from the mouths of gravediggers drunk on cider and cold. The monk's voice is softer now, almost pleading. There are deaths that come sudden, yes. You cradle the candle, its hum lingers in your marrow. Do you imagine burying it? You imagine lying beside it. Obscure historical fact. In 1411, during excavation of a plague pit in Bayonne, black wax candle was found among the bodies. Fringe ritual, the hum burial, right? Transcribed in a marginalia from the Anima Osseum Codex, instructed mourners to bury a braided candle beneath the heart of the deceased. Unsolved mystery. A black candle discovered beneath the Abbey of Saint-Nul. In 1794, still hums faintly when placed atop a wooden casket. You find it sealed inside a vial no larger than a thumb bone, coiled like a forgotten comma. The leech does not move. It will not move. The physician's note, some believed the leech was cultivated in darkness, not physical, but moral. That it was born not from swamp or womb, but from confession interrupted. The words vibrate against your sight, then fade. You blink and they're gone. That each one forms when a sin is remembered but not forgiven. Not because they dazzle, but because they define. And what is defined cannot be undone. A pause. The leech is not cruel. 'Tis a cloth, wiping the window between you and your own scream. He exhales. But remember this, child. What is forgotten may return. It instructs patients to reflect their terror into a basin before feeding the leech. Warning, do not reflect love. He stopped speaking. Later, he refused to sleep without shadows near his bed. Not light, shadows. Then, fleetingly, the mirror would show what the viewer most feared. The mirror shattered during transport. They say his mother gave him a leech in a jar, told him to let it drink the nightmare. The sisters swore it cured visions of death among the terminally ill. The convent records ceased that year. You wrap it tightly and return it to the bag, but its weight is different now. Not heavier, but known. Like a thought you tried to discard, only to find it nested deeper. It did. He grew silent, then peaceful. At age 15, he stopped casting reflections. That it has no hunger unless your fear glows. He notes a rumor from a Florentine alchemist. The leech will not drink from cowards. Only those who have seen truth and flinched. Scribbled into the margins of a prayer card tucked beside the bottle, warned clearly. It is not dead. It is only done. You sit, you read. The story is not long, but it cuts. The physician encountered the leech in a fever ward, in Rouen, given to him by a woman who could no longer blink. She claimed it had once fed on her eyelids and removed the visions that caused her waking screams. When asked what she had seen, she answered simply, "I no longer recall." And that is mercy. A leech, dried, rigid, blacker than night in a cellar. Its surface reflects nothing. Not the candlelight, not your gaze. As if it were made not of flesh, but the absence of seeing. The vial is corked with resin, stamped with the same spiraled sigil you saw etched into the bell. A downward-pointing nail cleaving an eye. Tag. Brittle and near dust, dangles from a string looped around the neck. In trembling Latin, tenebrae hoster, the drinker of light. You tilt the vial. The leech, it is said, its body is not smooth. It is lined with what look like tiny cilia, each shaped like an eye. Feel them watching you, not from the leech. It's from the image of the leech inside your thought. You turn it away. The vial warms in your palm. Place it on the cloth, and the shadows near it grow deeper. It was not applied to the skin, but to shadows cast by the eye. A bowl of holy water, darkened with soot, was used to catch the reflection of one's own fear. The leech was then placed into the reflection, not the water. The leech would attach and feed, not on flesh, not on blood, but on the image. It consumes the brightness of dread, writes the physician, leaving the memory unlit. Like a dream whose ending you forget when you open your eyes. But the act is not without cost. He speaks of patients who could no longer distinguish between sleep and death, between mercy and amnesia. You examine the leech more closely. The accompanying writing shifts in tone, part biology, part invocation. The physician admits uncertainty about its origin. Folded inside the prayer card is a second leaf, blank except for one line. Do not show it your child. You remember an old tale told by the candle keepers of St. Just, of a boy who stared into the gleam of his dying father's eyes and saw his own death reflected there. The monk's voice weaker than before, now like a wind behind a door, long shut. There are things too bright to be seen. You pick up the vial. The leech is still. The space around it pulses faintly. Obscure historical fact. In 1428, a sealed vial was discovered in a plague-stricken convent near. It contained a preserved leech labeled Hoster Noctis, fringe ritual. The feeding of the leech appears briefly in the Ferrum Threnody. A lost physician's manual recovered from a flooded crypt. Unsolved mystery. A mirror found in the catacombs of San Callisto bore no image, unless a small black object was placed nearby. Folded at the very bottom of the bag, beneath layers of waxed silk and copper threaded gauze, lies a sealed parchment ringed with red twine, the knot smeared with soot and pressed with an impressionless seal, not blank but worn to erasure. The fibers resist your touch like an oath reluctant to be remembered. The moment the physician's hands brushed the patient's forehead, he felt it. A memory not his own, a soundless scream pressed into the joints of his fingers. To let the bag carry what the voice cannot risk. He renounced prayer aloud. He ceased writing prescriptions, communicated through glances, gestures, the position of a single needle left upright or sideways. Of how he traced meaning in the dust left on windowsills and the pattern of candle soot in the pauses between coughs. He believed the plague was not sent, but summoned. It is a shape made from absence. He did not choose to be silent. He chose to be unheard. That is different. That is deeper. A ragged cough. Would you give up your voice, child, if it meant your breath might go unnoticed by what listens in the corners of death? Not by sin, not by rats, but by noise. The world had spoken too much, led too beautifully. The silence came to correct. And in this vow, the bag transformed. No longer a vessel of tools, but a mouthless monastery, a reliquary of forfeited speech. Their scripture was carved into salt. Their prayers were woven into veils. It was said they could tell the hour by the rhythm of their own hearts, and that they buried each other standing up, mouths stitched shut with flax thread dipped in ink. There were no symptoms, no breath, only an understanding. The plague was not a sickness. It was a listener. And the physician, by speaking to it, by naming it, had been heard. You understand now that the physician's final act was not healing. It was retreat. Sacrifice not of flesh, but of resonance. The bag was never only for instruments. It was a coffin for sound. It states that speech summons watchers. Silence cloaks the soul. Initiates were said to silence not only their voices, but the sound of their footfalls. As you uncoil the twine, a breathless stillness descends. It contains only illustrations, no text. Even the candle forgets to flicker. You recognize the gravity of the page before it's read. This is no object of treatment, no tool of observation. One bore a stitched phrase in Hebrew: "Be still, and you will pass unseen." This is a promise, once spoken, now encased in ink. The physician's final vow, you unfold it. The writing is different, tighter, scraped rather than penned. The lines are sharp, abrupt, as if carved into the parchment, with something less like a quill and more like a needle. The first sentence is not in Latin, nor French, nor any known tongue. It is a circular sigil, drawn by hand yet impossibly symmetrical. A note beside it reads, "Do not bury this. It remembers." Beneath another sentence, he bit it free the day the walls whispered back. Beneath it, in the physician's own fractured hand, "I have learned what no mouth should repeat. I have written what should never be read. I have healed what should not have survived. For these acts, I offer no penance, only silence." He writes of a patient who spoke no language, who communicated only in touch. Thus the vow, to speak no more, act, teach by touch, to bind each word beneath wax. Tucked into the corner of the parchment is a sliver of blackened tongue, mummified, flattened, and wrapped in a ribbon of white lace. The physician's last passage, trembling with reverence, speaks of a language learned not from books, but from the alignment of shadows. You remember a monastery, rumored lost beneath the snows of La Massif Central, where no monk had spoken in 4 generations. The monk's voice, nearly gone now, breathes like a hand passing over dying coals. A vow is not a silence. You seal the parchment again. You wind the twine back around the oath.
Obscure historical fact. A 14th century medical manual attributed to the anonymous physician without words was recovered in 1690 from beneath a collapsed apothecary in Rouge.
Fringe ritual. The vow of the unspeaking is described in the Cloister of Breath, a lost Carthusian document. Unsolved mystery. In 1814, an ossuarian lion was uncovered containing dozens of jawbones with tongues still intact, wrapped in silken cloth. At the very bottom of the bag, beneath all relics and wrappings, your fingers brush something firm. Not metal, not parchment. Something that breathes faintly with heat once held. A presence long since discarded. You lift it carefully, reverently. It is the mask. The original. Its beak is long and narrow, shaped from softened leather scorched at the tip as if kissed by fire. The stitching is irregular, almost frantic, as though each seam had been sewn not with needle and thread, but urgency and guilt. No glass remains in the eyes. Just dark, hollow circles that pull your gaze inward until your breath stumbles. The interior is lined not with fabric, but with parchment, handwritten prayers too smeared to decipher, soaked in old wax and oil. And within the beak, a final scrap, folded, still wet at the edges. The plague doctor's mask, not a replica, not a symbol. You hesitate, then unfold it. You feel warmth that should not remain. And then, only then, you see it. In the corner of the parchment confession, in a hand you did not write and yet recognize fully. You've heard what he would not speak, but you have not yet understood. A pause. He was not recording. He was preparing. Beneath the beak, carved faintly into the leather ridge, your name, not written, carved in your own hand, yet you have no memory of it. Scrawled in trembling Latin, "This mask was made for you." It is not a note. It is a confession. As though gravity has grown polite. The handwriting matches the physician's, but looser, exhausted, unraveled. I wore it first as armor, then as penance, then as invitation. It was never to hide me from death. It was to show death that I was ready. He writes of wearing the mask for over a decade without removal. Not once, even in sleep, even in solitude. He speaks of how, over time, he forgot the shape of his own face. He began to see through the eyes of the mask. Not metaphorically. Literally, he describes visions in the streets of infected towns, ghost bodies of breath lingering in alleys, sins escaping mouths and plumes, memories dripping from ceilings like condensation. The doctor's body was never found. Only a thumbprint in wax, matching no record. I saw what breath wanted. I saw how it lingered, seeking. The ritual ends with the phrase, "Only the faceless may be seen." The final paragraph is brief. I took it off only once. And beneath that line, a single pressed thumbprint. Not in ink, not in blood. Every item was labeled in Latin, except one. The final object bore only a name. The name matched the person who opened it. The rest of the mask is silent, but something in the leather groans faintly as your fingers move. You freeze. Your hand draws back. The monk's voice returns. Final now, soft as lint caught in candle flame. You've read what he carried. You bring the mask closer. You stare into the eyeless sockets. And for the first time, they blink. You recoil. You drop the mask. But it doesn't fall. It hangs, suspended in place. Not floating, but resisting descent. And then you understand. The writings were never records. They were steps. Not notes from a plague doctor, but rites of succession. Each page, each relic, each whisper drawn from the bag, a transference. And now the bag is empty. But you are not. You place the mask back inside the bag. You do not seal it. You cannot remember your face. And the candle, somewhere in the shadows, begins to hum again. Obscure historical fact. A plague doctor's mask recovered in 1652 from beneath the catacombs of Montpellier bore a prayer stitched in bone. Where me, walk beyond breath. Fringe ritual. The mask of reception, cited in the ossuary dialogues, was said to be worn by those willing to become vessels for illness. Unclaimed by God? Unsolved mystery? In 1807, a sealed plague doctor's bag was discovered beneath a collapsed hospice in Enduz. The candle flickers now, not with light, but with memory. The bag lies before you, open but full. Each item returned, each page resealed, but their echoes linger like psalms sung backward. You sit in silence, yet feel no peace. Something inside you itches, a new silence, not absence, but vocation, without knowing that others will fall sick, that others will call, that the door will creak open someday, and someone will say, "We found this. We don't know what it means." And your hands will move before your mouth can deny it. You will open the bag. Again, you think perhaps you have survived something, but then you realize you have only inherited. The monk's final whisper comes like breath upon the last page of an unread book. If your candle hasn't gone out yet, you might be ready for the next book. There are more books. There are always more. The next whisper is older still, but only for those who truly listened.